Thank you so much, and thank you to CMP for hosting this. I'm just going to start sharing my screen here. Um, so yeah, as Jacqueline mentioned, the Conservation Monitoring Effectiveness Techniques project is an initiative of the Conservation Measures Partnership. The COMET team right now involves myself and Rachel Newgarten. Both of us are at WCS. I work for Rachel's conservation planning team there. Xiaoyue Li, who's on this call also, is our traditional knowledge expert. She's currently a professor at SMU. And Vanessa Rathbone, who is an independent consultant formerly at WCS, who has helped us develop both the material and then is also helping with the website design. So quick agenda. I'm just going to give a brief update for those people who are as yet unfamiliar with the Comet project itself, kind of what it is and what we've done so far. The main event will be a demonstration of the website and kind of giving people a preview of what features are available and what kinds of things you can do with it. And then at the end, the next steps, which is really the bits of what we could use in terms of your help to move this project forward. And so really quickly, I think we all kind of understand, we're all familiar with the conservation standard cycle. And the fact that monitoring is embedded in all of it, right? Whether it's at the planning stage where you're supposed to develop a monitoring plan, whether you're actually implementing that, using that information, sharing learning, using information to reassess, monitoring is really baked into every single part of the cycle. And what sparked the COMET project is that despite monitoring being so important, despite us all understanding that, there isn't a repository of publicly available sources for guidance on cost-effective monitoring and evaluation and reliable, field-proven monitoring and evaluation. And so what COMET aims to do is to develop a platform of a repository of industry standard, field-proven, cost-effective methods, and very specifically also trying to center traditional knowledge in indigenous and local monitoring systems alongside other monitoring methods as well. And Shell will talk about that a little bit more in a minute. And so what we've done is we've worked with practitioners, including local and indigenous communities, to try to understand the challenges and successes of their monitoring efforts, taken that information, compiled it, and tried to put it into a format that is easy to navigate and where people can come to find the kinds of information they need on monitoring. And so what we've been looking for here is we wanted methods that are transferable. So for it to sort of truly be monitoring, we'd like methods that can be done in multiple places and that can also be done across time. We want methods that are effective and efficient. So in other words, you're getting information that is commensurate to the amount of resources you're putting in. And you also want things that are practical, right? So both that they're ground truth, in other words, the data that you're getting out actually is a reflection of what's going on, and also that it is possible for practitioners to use those methods. And here again, we're thinking about the people who would be using COMET as people with actual boots on the ground, just doing monitoring in the field and needing a bit of support to help figure out exactly how best to do it. This is not necessarily meant to be an academic tool per se, or something that, people with a ton of resources and lab groups would depend on primarily. They may also use it, but we're thinking more from a practitioner standpoint. And so what we did is we've conducted over 100 semi-structured interviews so far, including both traditional knowledge experts and also traditional knowledge holders, with expertises ranging from species monitoring, habitat monitoring, wildlife and human health, human well-being, hunting and threats, behavioral monitoring of people, acoustic monitoring, how to monitor governance, natural resource management, all of those things. We did pretty well in terms of our diversity. So we've conducted interviews with people from at least 19 different institutions, plus a variety of different local communities. We have representation from all continents, which is kind of awesome. Well, I guess except Antarctica, but the other 6 that matter. And the majority of our interviewees were also women, I think something like 65% or so. And so we took all of this monitoring information, and what we did with that is we developed a taxonomy of indicators, and I'm not going to go through this in much detail because Vanessa will kind of show you what it looks like in the site. But basically, the idea is that we've mapped all of these different methods to the indicators that they're designed to monitor. So that way, if you have your theory of change, you have your conservation plan, you can say, okay, here are the things that I need to monitor, and you can use that to figure out what methods might be best suited for that purpose. And we've really concentrated on the right side of the theory of change, so the outcome stuff, things like populations, you can see some of the examples here, like habitat quality, habitat loss, populations of different animals, things like that, and less so on kind of the input variables or the stuff that would come on the left side of the theory of change. Shell, this is your show now.
Okay, thanks, Galton. Hi, everyone. I'm Xiao. So I'm going to talk about the indigenous knowledge part of the COMET project. So first, I'm going to talk about the indigenous knowledge per se. So when we look at indigenous monitoring here, we're not just looking at a checklist of tasks. We're actually looking at a living and adaptive system. So far, we have identified 36 distinct methods through interviews and literature review. Well, to note here that this number 36, we expect it to continue to grow, I believe. And we have organized them into four interconnected nodes that illustrate how knowledge translates, how knowledge can be translated into action. So the first is more on the foundation. It all starts with traditional ecological knowledge, or TEK. So this is not just about data, it's knowledge, practice, and belief system that pass down through generations. So we categorize this into three areas, including the observational TEK, such as reading seasonal calendars and oral histories, etc., and practice-based TEK, such as traditional tracking or sea ice observations that is guided by spiritual protocols. And then lastly is the territorial documentation. So where we use things like story mapping and timeline building to kind of affirm a historical presence on the land. So this TEK knowledge, the tech, then informs and guides our second node, the governance and right-based methods. So monitoring is a tool for asserting authority, whether it's territorial patrols or cultural heritage monitoring. We can use these methods to ensure the integrity of sacred sites and to enforce compliance with indigenous law. So to support these rights, we have seen a massive trend toward technology-enhanced methods, which is our third node. So modern tools such as Cyber Tracker for mobile data collection and also COMAPIO for mapping, those tools are not really replacing the tradition. They're actually scaling the indigenous knowledge. So we are using remote sensing, camera traps, and also acoustic monitoring to get high resolution data that serves local needs. And the fourth node is the integrated assessment. So all of this eventually flows into this integrated assessment frameworks. And this is where we evaluate outcomes. So by using biocultural indicators, and the local communities or indigenous peoples, they can measure the health of the land through their own lens rather than an external one. So the most important part of this diagram is actually this final arrow. So these assessment really refine and strengthen the original TEK, which can create a powerful feedback loop. So it's a cycle of resilience that to make sure indigenous monitoring remains as adaptive as the ecosystem it protects. Gautam, can you switch to next one? Thank you. Our first diagram really showed the kind of the what of indigenous monitoring is, and this framework represents the how. So it's a four pillar structure designed to move us from the high level ethical principles to this actual and on the ground practice. So the first pillar is the foundational framework. So we begin with the non-negotiables. That's what we call maybe international standards like the FPIC, free, prior, and informed consent. But we also take a step further by embedding data governance principles like OCAP and CARE principles. So this can ensure that indigenous communities are not just participants, but the rightful owners and controllers of their own information and the knowledge system. And the second pillar is the knowledge integration models. So this pillar focuses on the braiding part, the braiding of knowledge. So instead of trying to fit indigenous knowledge into a more what we call the Western scientific box, we use approaches like the two-eyed seeing and also the multiple evidence-based approach combined with biocultural approach. So this would allow us to view the lands through both lenses simultaneously while respecting the integrity of each knowledge system. And the third pillar is a regional protocol. So we recognize that relationships must be, especially in terms of conservation monitoring, must be place-based. So this pillar really incorporates specific protocols from different regions that are available. For example, they're quite abundant in countries like New Zealand and Canada, and some are in Latin America. So this would serve as a reminder that what works for a community in Arctic might not apply to communities in the Amazon. And the fourth pillar, the final pillar, is the operational phase. So this final pillar is what I call the engine room for our guidance documents. So we have developed six operational phases that provide a step-by-step roadmap for practitioners. So it starts with internal preparation and self-reflection, and then it moves through relationship building and collaborative design. And then eventually it would conclude with knowledge mobilization. So inside the guidance document, each of these phases is backed by detailed case studies and step-by-step instructions. So the goal here is to provide conservationists and the practitioners with more than just a, I would say, more than just a theory. So we are giving them a practical toolkit to make sure that monitoring serves both the planet and the indigenous self-determination. I think the next Vanessa is going to demo the website. The floor is yours.
That is correct. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so you can take over.
Okay. Thank you, Xiao. Can everyone see that? Okay. Okay, well, great. Thank you. This is the demo portion of the repository that we have. Before I go through the demo, I just wanted to say a few things about the site. It's currently being worked on still, so it's in construction. The site copy and most of the imagery and things are placeholder. So those things will be finalized in the next few weeks. There's also, I just wanted to make note that we were planning to do a soft launch of the site in the next 2 weeks. So the idea would be that we'd be able to provide a URL to all of you so that you can actually go around and start using the site and interact and engage with the site. I'll go through the demo and then there'll be time for questions at the end. But feel free to, yes, make notes about things you have questions on and we can go back and look through the site. And then the other thing is that we will be offering the site in a few languages. So just to know that that's available and will be available. So this is the landing page, the home page for the site. We have a dashboard here that's kind of introducing the project at a high level, just how many active methods are on the site. Again, this is an ongoing repository, so we're hoping these numbers continually increase with participation from users. But currently, the site will have over 50 methods. We've referenced over 80 papers within each of those methods. And then, like Gautam and Xiao were saying, we've had a lot of interviews and contributions from people all over the world. So the site is a very simple site. When you land on this landing page, there's a welcome to the platform. Again, none of this copy is finalized, but this gives you an idea of kind of where you can navigate through on the site. There's information about the types of monitoring that we will be showcasing and that are in the repository. So the habitat monitoring, ecosystem subtypes, species monitoring, threats and pressures, along with many more. If you click on any of these, it will take you to our monitoring page, the repository, and this this category, excuse me, will be highlighted. So all of the monitoring methods that have to do with habitat monitoring will be highlighted in the repository. So we'll go through that in a second. You can click here and that will drive you again to that monitoring methods page, the bulk of the content of the site. And then there's this section that will show up on a few places in the site where we're hoping that for users, a lot of people are potentially going to be practitioners themselves in the field, might be using a method that they're not seeing on the website that they think fits the COMET criteria. And this is a place where folks will be able to submit their method, and then someone from the COMET team will be reviewing them and publishing them to the site if they meet the criteria. So I'll go through that in a little bit. And then this is our classic footer that has all of our other information. So the navigation is super simple on this site. There's only 4 main pages that you can navigate to. The bulk of the site, again, is this monitoring methods repository. So we'll go into here. Here, there's a few ways in which you can sort through the information. So Gautam kind of explained how we had this typology that we developed that's based on not just our own internal ways of organizing and creating themes with our data, but our publicly recognized ways of organizing monitoring methods. And you can search for them either via the search bar, which we've integrated into the site for potentially linking with AI in the future. That's a future development, not for this iteration, but you can still use it to connect to keywords. If you type in habitat, start typing it in, it will self-populate and you can select that way. But the easiest way that we've organized it is that all of these typology that Gautam was referencing are all organized here. So we have these 8 main method categories, the different types that we have. That are kind of like below that category level, and then all of the subcategories, which are basically all of the different types of indicators. We still have gaps in the data, so these are all referencing things that we've been able to find monitoring methods for, but you know, they're not all complete. So we are definitely looking for contributions from practitioners and folks like you on this call. So the way that this works is you can start at any any part of this filter system. You can start with just saying, I want to see all of the habitat monitoring, and you'll see that right now there's these 40 kind of placeholder methods that are here. There will be more when we launch the site, but it starts with all of them. And then as you filter, it kind of narrows down your search. So you can go through and kind of say, well, there aren't any of those, sorry. There are some habitat monitoring, the terrestrial ones, those are the ones you want to see. And here are the 9 methods that fit those categories and typology. So the organization of the site is hopefully very straightforward and makes sense for folks to be able to search with whatever category they're looking for and to whatever specificity. We do have only one example right now. I think there might be 2 actually of traditional knowledge that have been uploaded. Obviously, this is not the right image for this. Again, these are all placeholder, but all of the traditional knowledge methods will be tagged with this traditional knowledge tag on the thumbnail. And they'll show up in the same way that all of the other monitoring, all of the other filtering will show up. So they're not excluded from any of the filters, they're all combined. And that's really a way for us to integrate, showing that there are these other ways of monitoring. And then you can know that there are traditional knowledge ways that match your monitoring needs. So once you're here and you see a method that you like, you can click into it into more detail. The general idea for each of these pages is that they're structured in similar formats and they have a basic summary of what that method is. There's some other different examples of use cases. There's different types of requirements. And if there are requirements, they'll be listed here. If there are any tools, guidance, and support, they'll be listed here. If there are known limitations, there will be information about that. And then any traditional knowledge consideration, if it isn't a traditional knowledge method, will be noted here, as well as a link to Xiao's guidance principles that she was referring to. And then these will be active case study links if that's applicable as well. Other things that you can have on your site or on the detail page that you might see are other images, videos, webinars, et cetera, that are in relation to that monitoring method. And then below, again, these are just placeholder, but any relevant methods or related methods to the filter that you selected will show up at the bottom to kind of, if you wanted to go through that way, you can select them. One of the other features on the page that you'll see is there's a profile setting. When you sign in, when you get to this site, it'll say sign in, and you can sign into a profile. This is beneficial for a few reasons, but for the user, it's very beneficial to be able to favorite different methods. So once you've selected the heart on the side, that means that it will now be saved to your profile. So I've gone through and selected a few just as a demo, but it asks for basic information to set up your profile. You can set it up through Apple, Google, and then you can just set it up via your email. It'll ask you for your name, email, the country that you're affiliated with, and then if you want, you can also include your occupation, which we have a drop-down list for. And then you'll see all of your methods that you've collected are going to be here. Again, apologies for the thumbnails, images of things like a salad. They will all be there, but they will also be able to be sorted by that higher category classification that we had, so that when you are doing all this work, researching and finding all these methods, if you ever wanted to quickly come back and see, oh yeah, I remember referencing that threats method, it'll be saved here so you don't have to go through the whole filter system again. And you can kind of curate your own repository, so to speak, and have your own profile. This also helps us from a COMET team perspective understand where our users are coming from. It allows us to understand the types of methods people are actually saving and looking at. We won't see what you're saving. We'll just see how many people are engaging with the methods. And that will help us understand maybe we should focus more on getting more methods that address those categories, or maybe we need to cover different gaps, et cetera, or focus on different geographies. But we really tried to make it a very wide breadth of information. So that's kind of how the bulk of the monitoring methods repository component works. There's also the traditional knowledge aspect of the project, which Xiao and Gautam referenced and Xiao talked about a lot. This page is really explaining a lot of what Xiao just went through and highlighting the importance of traditional knowledge, not only the inclusion of traditional knowledge in monitoring and evaluation, but also how to approach and integrate and co-produce with traditional knowledge holders. So this page, again, is still under construction, but the idea is that here you'll be able to understand the role of traditional knowledge in conservation monitoring and some of the types of ways that traditional knowledge can be used in monitoring, and some basic applications for traditional knowledge in the field. Things that are missing on this page right now are Xiao's guidance document. So that's being worked on over the next few months. So that will be featured on this page. And so that guide will be here, as well as some of the infographics you just saw Xiao referencing. And it will also link back to that monitoring repository to show all of the traditional knowledge monitoring methods that we have. Next is the About Us page. So the About Us page is a very simple page describing the project itself. It's a basic introduction about the project. It also has a reference for our funders and partners to have their logos featured here and a description if we want to say who they are. Like Jacqueline mentioned, the Moore Foundation, we would obviously mention CMP and any other partners if the site continues to grow and we want to have those acknowledgments here. This page will also have a sublink. So that's something that's missing from this page, is that it will link out to our report that goes through all of the details of our method collection for this project. Basically, everything that is the nitty-gritty of how many people we interviewed, what types of interviewing we did, how we did semi-structured interviews, those types of things, the IRB process that we went through. So that's all included in that report. So if people really want to get into what COMET, how it came about, all of the details, that'll be there. So that'll be linked from this page. And then finally, again, you have your profile page. So again, this is under construction and we are looking for a lot of participation and hopefully we can ask from you all. I don't know if I should stop sharing my screen and go to the slides, Gautam, quickly, and then we can go back to the site.
Sure, I can do that. Just give me a moment to pull it up. There we are. And then I can do that. All right.
I
This is
just want,
where,
yeah.
yep.
I just wanted to say also that the site is a custom built site. So it's built with the idea that it's going to be able to be accessible in places that don't necessarily have great Wi-Fi, don't have good connectivity. The idea is that it's a very lean, mean site so that it can host a lot of content. So as the repository grows, it will be able to handle the content and it will be accessible in places that again don't have great connectivity. And the idea is that, you know, some places just don't have great connectivity. And also if you're in the field ever and you need to reference it, it'll be able to upload it and et cetera. And it's all obviously a responsive design. It'll be available on your cell phone and tablets, et cetera. So if you want to go to the next slide, Gautam. So things that we're seeking from the community here. Again, we'll be able to send out the link so that people can go around and look at the site themselves once it's a little bit more complete. And we do this, what we're calling a soft launch. The final project ends again at the end of March. So that's kind of the hard deadline for the project, but we wanted to give the practitioners room to play around and see how the site fits their needs. So we'll definitely give you that. Oh, you know what I didn't do? Sorry, I'm very sorry. I didn't go through how to submit a method. So maybe that'll be a good chance to go back to that. But I will show you now how to submit methods if you don't see them on the site and you think yours fits the COMET criteria. And then again, please continuing to spread the word about this project and share the site with your networks, et cetera. So once we are able to give you that URL, that would be excellent if you can share it with your networks. But let me quickly, I'm sorry, Gautam, to do that. Okay. So I mentioned this before, but as you saw with the monitoring methods detail pages, a few that we looked at, they each have these different categories. So if you didn't see a method or are using a method that you think would be a good thing to have on the site, please feel free to submit it. It's a very simple process of just submitting a name. We have categories that are based on the typology that you saw in the filters. and you select, these are all mandatory with the asterisk next to them. You select them. You put your author name, that won't be published, so that will be hidden. You can or cannot do that, but it's helpful for us if we need to follow up with anything. If this is a traditional knowledge monitoring method, you can toggle this back or forth. Um, and each of these will have a description of what to include here. So that's something that's in progress. But essentially, you'll write a description, a brief description. This has a word max on it. All of these do. The summary will be more like an abstract, just a short 250 word summary of the monitoring method. Any other use cases that this monitoring method can be used for, requirements that might be necessary, and such as softwares, personnel, costs, things like that. Then tools, guidance, and support, if there are existing tools that you use, um, things like that, you put them there. Limitations, traditional knowledge considerations. If you don't put anything here, this will automatically fill in with Chow's guidance document as a link. And then if you know of or you want to list yourself as an organization that's using this method, we feel that that'll build a lot of more credibility with each of these methods and allow for other people to know who in the field is also using them. The submitted by will not be published as well, so you can put that as who you are, or if you interviewed someone, you can also include that. And then any case study links, papers, case study links can be linked here. You do have to provide a thumbnail, so this will have specs for it, but it will be as easy as just dragging and dropping an image. If there are other images, so if you have video or images that you also want to include, they're not mandatory. The thumbnail is. And then again, you can attach files if you have like a spreadsheet that you already use that's really good for data collection and you want to share it, you can add it here as well. And there's also the option to include a bunch of different reference links, so YouTube's, webinars, etc. You can add here, and then you submit the suggestion. And we don't know exactly what the cadence will be, but we're hoping that, on a monthly basis, these will be reviewed and screened for COMET criteria and then published to the site, or followed up with to see if we can help fill in some gaps or clarify anything. So I guess I'll stop there. And Xiao and Gautam, if I missed anything, just feel free to add anything else. But maybe we can have time for some questions and comments on the site.
Yeah, and I just wanted to very quickly reiterate something that I'd said kind of at the beginning, which is how do we actually map this back into the conservation standards? So actually, I'm going to reshare my screen, Vanessa, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
And so the way we're sort of envisioning this working is that, you start with your theory of change. You have your assessments done, you have everything, and once you've sort of within your theory of change, you have your indicators. That's when we start to think about using Comet, right? So you have a set of indicators that you have to measure in order to figure out the efficacy of your conservation actions and or figure out that whether or not they're working, be able to do adaptive management, things like that. And so Comet would be the place to come in and say, okay, well, I know I have to measure, fish populations. I know I have to measure, the species of interest that I have. I know I have to measure something to do with human well-being based on the creation of a protected area. Whatever those indicators might be, and you can come in and say, okay, well, what are these proven ways of monitoring these indicators, right? And that's why we've sort of provided a wide range of different methods that correspond to a wide range of different things, because we understand that, it's not just about, well, how do I set up camera traps? It can extend far beyond that to things like tracking the effectiveness of a particular protected area or the benefits from it or changes in behavior, whatever else it might be. But that's kind of how we would envision this fitting into the theory of change, if that makes sense. And yeah, other than that, yeah, as Vanessa said, would love to take any questions or anything else. We've been trying to answer a few things in the chat too. Um, and yeah, any other feedback that you might have.
Yeah, are there any that you'd like to share aloud from the chat? I know there were some questions about linking to other sites or databases. There were some different language questions in here. Anything that you want to share aloud before we continue with questions? Or folks, if you feel like you want more of an answer, maybe pop in with the question that you wrote in the chat.
I'll just say that we definitely are trying to bring together the guidance and information that's available elsewhere. That will be found more so in links that are in each of the monitoring methods that have some sort of link back to those. So not explicitly calling out things like Consoci or like those actual other platforms in the same way that but there could be a list. And if that's something that people think would be really helpful, then we could create a page that has kind of a list of different guidances or frameworks that already exist. We were really trying to focus on explicitly providing monitoring methods that are able to be used in the field. So not necessarily all of the guidance and content that's out there.
Thanks for that. I think I might have seen Nicholas. G, did you still have a question?
Yeah, I did. So first of all, thank you. This is a really, really cool platform, and it's very, very exciting. I can't wait to get into it and look and see some more. But looking at some of the monitoring methods that were presented and some of the target indicators that they'd be applicable for, I think Galton also mentioned this, that a lot of these are monitoring approaches that are mostly applicable for the right side of a theory of change. Um, Very, very helpful. But what about the middle and sort of early parts? That's, something that a lot of our projects put a lot of time and work into is what are the monitoring approaches for the indicators for objectives that are occurring in the middle of the chain. So things like economic empowerment, community equity, social cohesion, learning, all these sorts of things that, a lot of conservationists have a background in ecology, but maybe less so in the social sciences. So is the expectation that eventually this platform would fill out with those sort of monitoring approaches as well? Or is that maybe outside the scope of what this platform is envisioning?
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly answer that partially, and then actually, Rachel, since you've raised your hand, do you want to take that one? Then I can fill in.
Go ahead. Why don't you go ahead and I'll chime in.
Yeah, so I think the answer to that is the way Comet was kind of set up to us by the CMP was this desire to look more closely at stuff that's on that end of the theory of change. But absolutely, we totally agree that it's really, really important to be able to monitor some of these other things that are not quite the outcome variables. And we do have a pretty decent set of social indicators there, but again, this is sort of what Vanessa was getting at as well, which is for some of these things, we may know that they're really important, but we may not, through our data collection process, have gotten the information that we would like. And so this is where if you think that, something's missing or something really should be mentioned that isn't, we would absolutely love to see that. So, by all means, yes. If you think there are gaps there.
Yeah, I mean,
Rachel.
would those really quickly, would those inputs be supported with a option structure that includes? So I saw a lot of, monitoring for threats, monitoring for species, monitoring for habitats, and I saw a section for human well-being. Is that intended to be sort of also those? Because sometimes I think, we interpret human well-being as, even after the biodiversity value, goal outcomes, but it could also be the objectives and stuff happening in the middle chain. So just in terms of like a submission structure, would human well-being sort of be the intended category people might use?
There's also national management and governance as well that could fit in
Okay.
there. Yeah.
All right. Excellent. Sorry. Yeah. Go ahead, Rachel.
Yeah, no, I was just listening. Yeah, and I agree with everything Gautam said that we in part we needed a sort of narrowing of scope because otherwise this platform could have been a really overwhelming task in terms of sort of the number of potential indicators that would be useful to monitor. So as a first cut, the focus was on the right-hand side of the chain. That said, what is on the right-hand side of a theory of change or results chain is a bit arbitrary, right? So if it's a policy strategy, policy change might be sort of the desired outcome. Some of the examples you gave in terms of sort of economic outcomes, and the more social science components, I forget the specific things you mentioned, to me are kind of, at least like conceptually, sort of things, ultimate things in the world that you're trying to change, even if they're also means to an end of a conservation project. So I think the goal, as it was framed for us by CMP, by the board and the steering committee, initially was to avoid focus on things that are really far on the left side, like numbers of people trained, more the sort of input type activities that are much easier to monitor and they tend to therefore be sort of reported on, but aren't the kind of what I tend to characterize it as like the change in the world you're trying to see, right? Whether it's for people or for governance or for threat reduction or for ecosystems. But then I totally agree with what Gautam said in terms of like if there's gaps here, in terms of the methods you'd like to see represented, or if you have methods to suggest, or if there's gaps in those categories. So, yeah, I think like human well-being, some of the things you mentioned like might fit under human well-being or governance, but if there is a gap in terms of like economic, I forget the examples you gave. Yeah, just feel free to give us that feedback. And as Vanessa said, this we hope this will be a sort of living repository and it'll grow over time.
I just wanted to
Also,
say also that the site is built like I said, it was a custom built site, so it has the capability to grow, to integrate AI. There's like a lot of things that this site can do that we have ideas on. I think, like Rachel said, we weren't tasked with that complete monitoring cycle, but I think that's something that we've talked about with the CMP team, with the steering committee, with our advisory group about how that would be something that, like including some of those other types of indicators would be obviously just make the site more complete and comprehensive for monitoring throughout the whole cycle. So, yeah, I think submit things that you don't see, and I think that there's no real limit right now. We're really eager to get more submissions because it was only really the group of us doing all the interviewing and research. And we were trying to not only focus on like, peer-reviewed desk research methods. So yeah, that'd be great. And also, someone just commented, Carrie Stiles wrote about the Marathi integration of COMET, which is a great suggestion. And I will talk to the FOS team and the CMP team about that and see if there's a way to, if not just have the URL link. I don't know if they can speak to each other in that sophisticated of a way yet, but that type of integration, at least we could push people over there and maybe we could have it self-select based on what they're looking for in Marathi. That's a great idea.
Any other questions or comments for the team? I know there was one comment in here that I think you guys did address, but might be worth sharing aloud about kind of what's next and what people can expect. I know you mentioned at the beginning of the call that there was going to be a soft launch, but how can the folks on this call and beyond help you guys in this kind of next soft launch phase?
Sorry, I was reading Gino's comment in the chat,
I'm
so
sorry,
I can
it was the
I
worst
wasn't
timing. Yeah.
multitasking.
No, that's okay. I can start and then maybe Vanessa Gautam Shao can chime in. Yes, thank you for that question, Jacqueline, and for pointing us to that in the chat. So Vanessa, the question was how, basically what's next? How can people help?
Yeah.
So One will be when we share the URL, we would love for you to poke around on the site and send us feedback. So I don't know exactly what the process is, but Vanessa will tell you what the process and timing for that will be. Second will be there's at least three ways, and then tell me what else I'm missing. The second will be if you have monitoring methods that you think meet the criteria, please submit them. It doesn't matter if it's, a little bit half baked at this point. We want to work with people to add to this over time. Um, I'm thinking maybe we need a bit more of a proactive process for that too, because in my past experience, David, I'm channeling the ConPro database, the sort of build it and they will come mentality often is kind of hard. So I'm wondering if we can have maybe some like incentives or ways to get people to submit ideas for monitoring methods that are currently missing from the platform. Um, do keep in mind the criteria that the method has been used more than once in more than one place, and you consider it to be cost effective, meaning that the amount of money and time and capacity invested in that method is actually worth the information that you get out of it. And then there's the whole traditional and the indigenous knowledge component of that as well, which I think the criteria might be actually a little bit different there in terms of like making sure that we're achieving the principles that Xiao laid out and so forth. Okay, so the second, so first one is like poke around on the website, send us feedback. Second one is submit methods, and maybe the team will get back to you on the process for that too, if we maybe do some proactive outreach. Um, and then third one is spread the word. So we would love to make sure that people are aware that this website exists. We can launch it. I think we'll make sure that, there's various places, maybe the CMP website, maybe the Marathi Share, Carrie's idea, so that people find their way to Comet. Because we're also aware that if we just post this website, people may or may not find it. So we'll really rely on the power of the CMP and CCNet networks. We'll probably have more webinars like this. We'll probably have some email blasts just so people are aware that this resource is available. So those are three ideas for me in terms of how you all can help.
Yeah, I think those were the main things that we have on the slides, and we'll obviously send out the deck. And like I said, we'll be able to provide you all with a link so you can look around on the site. We're just finalizing kind of the hosting and the ability to push the site live. So I will be able to share that with you. And I think depending on the load of like the amount of people, we might keep it just to not share with your networks yet and keep it internal to this type, like the CMP network for at least a little bit of time before Xiao's final guidance is up on the site and some of the last, like the very few last pieces are up. But by the end of March is when we'll kind of really press the gas for making sure that this gets out there. But in this interim, yes, would love feedback on the site itself, any submissions of methods, and I can send out a little video on how to submit a method, if that's helpful too, and then with the list of criteria, and then yeah, just supporting it once we do the actual hard push for the site. We don't have a plan to post it on Wild Labs. I see that from the chat yet, but we have worked with Wild Labs, so we could ask them if they would be willing to post it on their forum. I'm sure they would.
One thing I've seen in my activities is that indigenous communities really want to be involved. They need to be invited to be involved. They want to actively participate. They just don't know how. And in many cases, they don't even know the opportunities exist. So I think once we release the site, it's important to get the word out to indigenous communities so that they're aware that this opportunity exists for them and they can participate.
I think that's right. Xiao, I don't know if you wanted to comment on that, but yeah, I think that's the point of having this guidance document and being able to have everything integrated so that it lowers that barrier of the intersection and the approach that we're hopefully trying to showcase, traditional knowledge methods alongside these, potentially more scientifically proven methods, and that there are many ways of doing things and how to actually integrate those. So hopefully this is an attempt at that. And Xiao's guidance doc will definitely not just provide one or two case studies, it has that format of how to actually do that engagement.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Vanessa. I also wanted to talk a little bit on Gino's question. So it's not necessarily like a method per se in terms of different stages. But for if anyone wants to or planning to work with IPLCs, the guidance document in each of the phase where will point to different guidance or frameworks that helps you to kind of know how to engage ethically and respectfully with the community. So this part is more on the like ethical engagement, not necessarily method per se, but we do collected data on a particular method from like more A to Z style, right? From collection to analysis.